Hello and welcome back to Bookish, and welcome to a review of We Want Freedom, A Life in the Black Panther Party by Mumia Abu-Jamal. This is a book that I found thanks to Brianna over at their channel, Rad Reads, and I read it this month as one of my Black History Month reads, and I wanted to share some thoughts with you about it and just basically break those thoughts down into three categories. The book's strengths and weaknesses as a work of history, bias in the book, and then I want to talk just about some thoughts about the Black Panther Party that I've had, and about kind of how we look at the civil rights movement, how we look at the movement for social justice in the United States, and how, I believe it is a requirement of being a thinking, thoughtful citizen of our republic, to think about what we've been taught and reevaluate that and constantly be trying to educate ourselves on those issues. So first of all, the book as a work of history. There are some real strengths in this book. I blew through the first 100 pages because this topic about civil rights history, and particularly about the Black Panther Party, which I've been curious about for a very long period of time, really just drew me in. And Mr. Abu-Jamal does a great job of kind of connecting the Black Panther Party to examples of armed resistance by African Americans and by black people throughout American history, and connecting it to revolts of enslaved people and slave rebellions, and to John Brown, and to various other efforts by African Americans, by black people in the United States to take up arms and to win their freedom and to win their rights and to win their safety by using potentially violent methods. The book really solidly kind of lays a foundation for how the Black Panther Party came into existence, the leadership of the Black Party and their ideas, and how they created that, and how quickly the enthusiasm for the Black Panther Party spread, not just among people who joined, but among the black population of the United States as a whole. That African American people in the United States embraced or admired the Black Panther Party almost from the very beginning, in large numbers and large percentages, even if they had no intention of joining, which I thought was great. And then Mr. Abu-Jamal also does a great job of laying out essentially the war the United States government waged against the Black Panther Party from about 1969 into the early 1970s by using FBI documents and government memos and documents to prove that the FBI was intentionally trying to destroy and eliminate the Black Panther Party. And if you go and look at the history of the Black Panther Party, you will find that there are numerous examples of leaders and members of the Black Panther Party being imprisoned, being arrested for crimes which they were later found out they didn't commit, that there are numerous examples of the FBI trying to subvert the party and create dissension with the party, of paying snitches and informants to give them information about party activities, and even in the case of Fred Hampton and so many others, about FBI agents essentially carrying out assassinations against Black Panther Party leaders. And I thought that history was really well laid out. There are some weaknesses, I thought, to the book as a work of history. First, it's kind of confusing in places and a little bit repetitive when it's talking about reasons for the split that took place in the Black Panther Party between Eldridge Cleaver and Huey Newton. That part I thought was kind of murky and muddy, and I wondered if it wasn't because Mr. Abu-Jamal was really reluctant to take sides and to appear to be a supporter of one or the other of those men. But those splits essentially destroyed the Black Panther Party really quickly and led to it kind of fracturing, and as it fractured it became less effective and things like that. I also thought while there's a really important chapter in the book about women in the Black Panther Party and how integral they were to its success and to its activities, I did think that there was some evidence that a lot of the information was included to try to diminish some of the real sexism and misogyny that did exist among some members. and even leaders of the Black Panther Party. And then I thought the book lost a little bit of its objectivity when trying to establish kind of the important, long-lasting legacy of the Black Panther Party. Some of those sections felt a little bit strained. But I think as a work of history, it works really well. And it is a book that if you're interested in the Black Panther Party that you should definitely consider consulting as an introduction to the topic. Now, on the issue of bias, the second point I wanted to raise, there is bias, and I'm going to tell you right now, as a writer of history, a reader of history, there is bias in all history. It is impossible to eliminate. In this case, though, I have a feeling that a lot of people, when I tell them the next thing, if you didn't already know, about the author, Mumia Abu-Jamal, are going to just dismiss this book as a completely biased, one-sided work of propaganda, and that is incredibly unfair. Mumia Abu-Jamal was a Black Panther. He was a part of the Philadelphia chapter. He was involved in the Ministry of Information. He helped produce the newspaper, the Black Panther. He knew and had met Black Panther leaders. There's a picture of him speaking at the funeral observations of Fred Hampton. He is himself a Black Panther, and so you would assume that he has an interest in presenting the Black Panther Party in the best possible light. Fair enough. But, and a lot of people, like I said, will just dismiss the book as a work of history for that bias and assume it can't possibly be true. But do we dismiss, completely, for instance, President Obama's latest book about his administration? Do we dismiss the World War II narrative told by soldiers in World War II? Do we assume they're biased and therefore everything they're writing is propaganda and worthless? We don't. And I think people's tendency to maybe do that with this book and Mumia Abu-Jamal has more to do with our perception of the Black Panther Party. It is, I think, then an evidence of bias on the part of the reader, bias on the part of the American people and what we have come to know and learn about the Black Panther Party, or what we've been taught about the Black Panther Party, I really should say. So resist that effort. Certainly read the book with the idea that Mr. Abu-Jamal is not the most objective historian, but then again, neither are a lot of the other writers who've written about the Black Panther Party or about the civil rights movement in general. But keep in mind, don't just toss the book out and assume that it's propaganda, because I promise you, it is far more than that, and it is a valuable history, at least introductory history into the party. So the other thing that I want to talk about is just perceptions of the Black Panther Party. I'm 53 years old. I was never taught anything in school directly about the civil rights movement. I went to school in East Texas. I don't remember learning anything about the civil rights movement directly in my American history classes. At most, maybe we learned about Martin Luther King Jr., and that was about it. And then as I grew up and I, learned more, you learn this idea that Malcolm X was the opposite, kind of the antithesis of Martin Luther King Jr., which is unfair, and I've learned so much more about Martin Luther King Jr. since then. And you were taught, I think, and we came to believe, and the portrayal of the Black Panther Party, as Mr. Abu-Jamal talks about in the book, has been one of violent, negative, kind of almost cult-like people committed to violence. And that I feel is inherently unfair in kind of our approach to and thinking about the Black Panther Party. So this book helped me to kind of reset my thinking. I'm not going to tell you I agree with everything, single thing that the Black Panther Party stood for, or its leaders said, or the actions even that it took. But I do now see it more in its historical context, which is important. That it is not unusual in American history for kind of armed people to demand equality and to demand freedom. That is, the Black Panther Party was a part of that tradition in and of itself. And I think that's an important place to kind of begin. And then it also, once you kind of get rid of that idea, the Black Panther Party was this horribly violent organization made up of people who behaved in psychotic ways and wanted just to kill all white people and policemen. Once you get beyond that idea, which I think is oftentimes a popular idea people have, you can place the Black Panther Party, I think, in its proper context in the history of the American Civil Rights Movement. And Mr. Jamal does a pretty good job of this, I think. He makes a connection between the Black Panther Party and the Black Lives Matter movement. that both are fighting for freedom. Different methods, different ways of phrasing it, but both are fighting for freedom, and they are part of that long chain of people fighting for their freedom. Now, anytime you talk about in the United States, anytime in American history where we see African American people, black people arming themselves to defend their rights, to defend their freedom, we automatically feel the tut-tutting and, oh, you shouldn't do that kind of thing. That, violence is always wrong, and armed resistance will only lead to more violence. And those ideas come out, and in part this is because of the misinterpretation and misrepresentation that even I, as an former American history teacher, are guilty of exactly what Martin Luther King Jr. and the other civil rights leaders were doing with non-violent resistance. That non-violent resistance was intended to provoke a violent response, and because that's true, it's not that much separated from the idea of violent resistance, which in all honesty, violent resistance and Black Panthers carrying guns and Black Panthers patrolling and watching the police were designed to prevent violence from taking place. All that said, that doesn't make the Black Panther Party perfect. It doesn't, again, mean that I agree with everything they said, but I do have a greater appreciation for where they fit in with the civil rights movement as a whole and the future of the drive for freedom and equality and justice in the United States. And there's two more things I want to leave you with, since I'm talking about this right here near the end of Black History Month. Counseling or encouraging patience is something that people of privilege do. People who have the privilege not to be the subject of racism, discrimination, and violence in that way can sit back and say, oh, you have to embrace nonviolence. That's the only way forward. And yes, it's slow, and the arc of justice is long, but it bends towards, the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. That kind of counseling patience idea is something that is embraced oftentimes, I think, by white Americans, but it's embraced by them because they can. Because as white Americans, we're in a privileged enough position not to be directly affected. It's not white Americans who are being killed by the police, George Floyd, etc. That's not us. And as a result, we can say, oh, we need to be patient. I want to, but please understand that is a privileged position. I do think it's important to kind of keep all those things in mind and to, continue to educate ourselves about the reality of justice, freedom, civil rights in the United States of America. And this book is a really good introduction to the Black Panther Party, I think. Anyway, there you go. There's my review of We Want Freedom, A Life in the Black Panther Party by Mumia Abu-Jamal. Please let me know what you think about my review in the comment section below. And as always, thank you for watching.